Hello and welcome to English Bootcamp Lab. I'm your host, Ryan.
And I'm Daisy. It's great to be with you all today.
Today, we're diving into a topic that many of our listeners, especially those in Europe, have likely been feeling quite literally in the air around them. We're talking about the weather, and specifically the character of our winters. For the better part of 2 decades, the prevailing narrative has been one of gradual, almost imperceptible warming. Each winter seemed a little less harsh than the last. But the winter of 2026 has interrupted that story with a shiver and a question, forcing us to reconsider our assumptions. The title of our episode is Warm Winters in Europe. Is the cold coming back in 2026?
It's a fascinating question, Ryan. I think for the better part of a decade, many of us have become accustomed to winters that, well, don't really feel like winters anymore. I remember Christmases where you could comfortably sit outside a cafe with just a light jacket.
Exactly. The classic image of a snowy white Christmas has felt more like a nostalgic dream than a reality for many parts of the continent. There's been a noticeable shift, a gradual warming that has redefined the season. But this year, 2026, has felt different.
And it's more than just a feeling, isn't it? The data backs it up. We've seen meteorological records being broken, but not for warmth, for cold snaps and early frosts. It's a real shift in the narrative.
That's a crucial point. Anecdotally, many people might say it feels colder this year, but the meteorological data provides the objective evidence. We're not just imagining it. There are measurable differences in temperature, snowfall, and the duration of cold periods compared to the last several years. This shift challenges our recently formed expectations of what a European winter should be.
It certainly has. There's been a definite bite in the air that's been absent for a long time. We've seen more frost, more snow in places that haven't had significant snowfall in years, and just a general persistent cold.
This winter has certainly been a conversation starter. It's moved from the usual small talk about the weather to a more serious discussion about what this might mean for the future. Are we seeing a genuine reversal, or is this just a temporary departure from the established warming trend? It's a question with significant implications. Which brings us to our central question. Is this colder winter of 2026 just a temporary blip, a statistical anomaly in an otherwise warming world? Or could it be signaling a more complex shift, a potential return to the colder, more traditional winters we remember?
That's the core of our discussion today. We'll be exploring the scientific context, the human impact, and the linguistic nuances of talking about these changes. So let's start by looking back. Ryan, why have our winters felt so much warmer over the last 10 to 15 years?
Well, the overwhelming scientific consensus points to long-term climate tendencies. In simple terms, global average temperatures have been rising consistently. It's not a linear year-on-year increase you'd notice daily, but a persistent upward trend over decades.
Right, so it's a cumulative effect.
That's a good way to put it. Think of it like adding a single drop of warm water to a bucket of cold water. One drop makes no difference. But if you keep adding a drop every second for hours, eventually the entire bucket becomes lukewarm. That's the principle behind the gradual warming we've experienced. Each year is a drop in the bucket. Precisely. And as a result of this baseline warmth, the character of our seasons has changed. Using the present perfect is appropriate here, because it's a change that started in the past and continues to affect our present. Winters have become milder. The periods of freezing temperatures have shortened.
And we've certainly seen less snow. I grew up in an area where building a snowman was an annual ritual. My younger cousins, however, have only had a couple of opportunities in their entire childhood.
And that personal experience is a perfect illustration of a wider ecological shift. Think about agriculture, for instance. For years, vineyards have been creeping further north into regions once considered too cold for growing wine grapes. That's a direct consequence of milder, shorter winters. This single change has economic and cultural implications that ripple outwards. That's a very relatable observation. This is due to the fact that for snow to form and settle, you need temperatures to be consistently at or below freezing. With average temperatures creeping up, precipitation that would have fallen as snow in the past now often falls as rain.
That makes sense. The conditions just haven't been right.
Another factor is the behavior of large-scale atmospheric systems, like the jet stream. For years, its pattern has often favored pulling milder, maritime air from the Atlantic over Europe, effectively shielding the continent from the intensely cold Arctic air to the north.
So we've essentially been living in a bubble of relative warmth, protected from the extreme cold that exists not too far away.
That's an excellent way to visualize it. This bubble has had profound effects beyond just making us put away our thickest coats. It created a sense of climatic predictability. Farmers could plan their planting and harvesting schedules with a certain degree of confidence. Energy companies could forecast winter demand more accurately. And on a personal level, we could plan holidays and daily life around the assumption of a mild winter. This year has shattered that sense of predictability. In many ways, yes. The cause and effect relationship is quite clear. Because global temperatures have risen, local climates have been impacted, leading to winters that are, on average, shorter, warmer, and less snowy. It has become our new normal.
Until this year, 2026, which leads us to the heart of the matter. What exactly feels so different about this winter compared to the ones that preceded it?
The most immediate and obvious difference is the sustained cold. It's not just a day or two of frost. We've experienced prolonged periods where the temperature has remained stubbornly below average. For example, in cities like Berlin and Warsaw, there have been weeks where the daytime high barely reached 0 degrees Celsius.
Yes, those persistent cold spells. They drain your energy in a way a single cold day doesn't. You start to feel the chill in your bones, so to speak.
Absolutely. And alongside the sustained cold, we've seen more frequent and intense cold spells, or cold snaps. These are sharp, sudden drops in temperature. That atmospheric shield I mentioned earlier seems to have weakened or shifted.
Allowing that Arctic air to spill southwards?
That's the current working theory for many meteorologists. The jet stream has become wavier, more meandering, creating channels for polar air to plunge deep into the continent. This is a stark contrast to the more stable zonal flow we've often seen in recent years.
That sounds quite technical. Can you break that down a bit? What does a wavier jet stream actually look like, and why does it have such a dramatic effect? Another thing I've noticed is how uneven the cold has been. It's not a uniform deep freeze across the board.
An excellent point. There's a significant uneven distribution. For instance, Scandinavia and Eastern Europe have experienced conditions far colder than their recent averages, with heavy snowfall. Meanwhile, parts of the Iberian Peninsula and the Mediterranean have had a relatively mild winter, closer to the recent norm.
So it's a winter of contrasts. That in itself is a departure from the more homogeneous mildness we've grown used to. The key takeaway seems to be a return of volatility.
Volatility and intensity. The winter of 2026 is contrasting sharply with recent memory, not just by being cold, but by being erratically and intensely so in specific regions. This brings us neatly to the tangible effects of this shift. How does this return to colder conditions actually impact people on a day-to-day level?
The practical impacts are immediate, aren't they? The first thing many people notice is the surge in heating costs. When you have weeks of sub-zero temperatures, your heating system is working overtime, and that is reflected very clearly in energy bills.
Right? It's a significant financial pressure, especially for those on tight budgets. Then there's the matter of simply being prepared. I suspect many people had to go digging in their closets for thermal underwear and heavy-duty winter coats that haven't seen the light of day for years.
I'm definitely guilty of that. My big coat was collecting dust at the back of the wardrobe. There's also the disruption to travel. Snow and ice on the roads cause traffic chaos, and airports struggle with de-icing protocols, leading to delays and cancellations. We've become less resilient to these events because they've been less frequent.
And this lack of resilience is a key point. It's not just about personal inconvenience. Entire sectors of the economy are affected. Supply chains are disrupted when roads are impassable, construction projects are delayed, and even retail suffers as people are less inclined to go out shopping in severe weather. We've built a just-in-time society that assumes a level of predictability that this winter has called into question. That's a very sharp observation. Our infrastructure and even our daily habits have adapted to milder conditions. Beyond the practical, there's a fascinating emotional and psychological reaction. For some, it's a welcome return. There's a deep-seated nostalgia for a proper winter.
The feeling that the seasons are back in their rightful order, the crisp air, the crunch of frost under your feet, it can be quite invigorating and beautiful. It feels correct somehow.
But for others, the persistent cold and gray skies can negatively affect their mood. The novelty wears off quickly when you're facing weeks of commuting in the dark and cold. It highlights a duality in our relationship with the weather. We might romanticize the cold, but we often prefer the comfort of mildness.
It forces an adjustment in our lifestyle. More time indoors, different social activities, a different pace of life. It's a powerful reminder of how much the environment dictates our behavior.
Indeed. So, we've established that this winter is different and has real, tangible impacts. This leads us to the million-dollar question. Is this a trend, or is it just a one-off? Is 2026 the beginning of a new chapter, or just a brief, chilly interruption?
This is where things get complex, and certainty is in short supply. One perspective is that this is simply a short-term fluctuation. Weather systems are inherently chaotic, and it's perfectly normal to have years that deviate from the average.
Exactly. Proponents of this view would argue that the fundamental physics haven't changed. The planet as a whole is still warming, and therefore the long-term trend will likely resume, meaning we might go back to milder winters next year. Notice the hedging language we're using here. Might, likely. It's crucial when discussing uncertain futures.
Of course. On the other hand, a different perspective suggests this could be a symptom of a more unstable climate system. Some climate scientists have posited that a rapidly warming Arctic could lead to a more destabilized and wavy jet stream.
Right. So, paradoxically, a warming Arctic might lead to colder winters in the mid-latitudes, like Europe. It's a counterintuitive idea. It's possible that our future isn't just warmer, but more extreme and unpredictable in both directions.
So this colder winter may not be a reversal of the warming trend, but rather a consequence of it. That's a much more complex picture. It seems we have to distinguish between overall climate and regional weather.
That is the key distinction. Global climate is the long-term average, while weather is the short-term reality we experience. It's perfectly feasible to have a record cold winter in one region while the planet as a whole has an unusually warm year. One could argue that this is the new reality, less predictability.
Ultimately, it's too early to say for sure. We're living in the middle of the experiment, so to speak. Drawing definitive conclusions from a single season's data is scientifically unsound.
That's right, and this uncertainty makes the language we use to discuss it all the more important. This seems like a perfect moment for our vocabulary and language spotlight.
Definitely. We've been using some specific terms today that are really useful for this kind of analytical discussion. Let's start with asterisk, asterisk, anomaly, asterisk, asterisk. We asked if 2026 was a statistical anomaly. In this context, an anomaly is something that deviates from what is standard, normal, or expected. A single cold year and a series of warm ones is a perfect example.
Closely related is the word fluctuation. We might say this year is just a natural fluctuation in the climate system. A fluctuation is an irregular rise and fall, a variation. It implies a temporary change rather than a permanent new direction.
Then there's asterisk, asterisk, cold snap, asterisk, asterisk. I think we all felt a few of these this year. A cold snap is a sudden, brief period of very cold weather. It's more intense and shorter than a cold spell. For instance, the sudden cold snap caught many gardeners by surprise.
Right. And to understand these events, we have to contrast them with the long-term trend. The long-term trend refers to the general direction of change over many years or decades. So we can say, despite this year's cold snap, the long-term trend for winter temperatures is still upwards.
We also talked about the unevenness of the cold, which we can describe as asterisk, asterisk, regional variation, asterisk, asterisk. This simply means differences across various regions. For example, there's significant regional variation in this year's weather, with Northern Europe being much colder than the South.
And finally, the broader concept that governs all of this is weather patterns. This is a general term for the recurring characteristics of weather in a particular area, often linked to large-scale atmospheric movements. A sentence could be, climatologists are studying whether global warming is fundamentally altering historic weather patterns.
Excellent. So, anomaly, fluctuation, cold snap, long-term trend, regional variation, and weather patterns, all incredibly useful for discussing complex, evolving situations like this one with precision.
So, as we draw towards the end of our discussion, let's try to summarize what we've covered and leave our listeners with some thoughts to reflect on.
We started by acknowledging a shared experience. European winters have felt progressively warmer for years, a new normal driven by a clear long-term trend of global warming.
Then we contrasted this with the reality of 2026, a year that has felt like a sharp return to a colder, more intense form of winter for many, characterized by sustained cold, frequent cold snaps, and notable regional variation.
We explored the everyday impacts of this, from the practical concerns of heating bills and travel disruption to the more emotional responses of nostalgia and mood changes.
And finally, we weighed the uncertainty of the future. Is this a temporary fluctuation in a warming world, or a sign of a new, more volatile phase in our climate? The answer, as we've discussed, remains elusive, and experts themselves are cautiously interpreting the data.
Which is where we'd like to turn the question over to you, our listeners. We encourage you to reflect on your own experiences. How has the winter of 2026 been where you are? Does it align with what we've discussed, or have you experienced something completely different?
Think about the longer term, too. If you've lived in the same place for a decade or more, have you personally noticed a change in the character of the seasons? Has your relationship with winter, what you wear, what you do, how you feel, changed over time?
And looking forward, what do you think the future holds? Do you anticipate a return to milder winters, or are you preparing for more unpredictability? It's a conversation that touches on science, memory, and our daily lives.
Ultimately, the winter of 2026 serves as a powerful reminder that our climate is a dynamic and complex system. It resists simple narratives. Perhaps the only certainty is that we must remain observant, adaptable, and willing to discuss these changes with nuance and an open mind.
Thank you for joining us for this thoughtful discussion on English Bootcamp Lab.
We look forward to having you with us again next time. Goodbye for now.